Welcome to Psychic Insights, where pop culture meets higher consciousness and the tea is always a little bit mystical. I'm Robin Richardson, your psychic girlfriend, and around here we don't just watch the drama unfold, we read the energy behind it, whether it's celebrity scandals, reality TV, chaos, or true crime with a twist. I'm tuning in to bring you the intuitive scoop the headlines miss. So buckle up. Your aura's about to get entertained. Welcome back to my channel. I'm Robin Richardson, your psychic girlfriend. There's something about this story that doesn't feel just like manipulation. It feels like a pattern that keeps repeating itself, almost like a loop you can't break out of. And when I was listening to episode 8 of Love Trapped, and if you're not listening to this, you've got to, the one about the third man, I kept asking myself, at what point does this stop being about love and start being about control, identity, and something much deeper? Because what we're looking here isn't just a messy relationship, it's a system, it's a pattern, and honestly, it's something I think a lot of people, especially empaths, can get pulled into without realizing it. So if you haven't been following this case, this episode comes from the podcast Love Trapped. And specifically, we're going to talk about episode 8, The Third Man. And what this episode really does well is it brings in another voice, another man. No surprise there, right? Another experience that starts to show us this wasn't isolated. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a pattern playing out across multiple people. And the man they focus on in this episode is Mike, who had the longest relationship, about 1.5 years. Still kind of mind-blowing. So we're not, well, no, not really. From my own experience, I'm not judging, believe me. So we're not just looking at a quick dating situation. We're looking at a prolonged exposure to this dynamic. And that's where things get revealing. And if you're new here, hi, I'm Robin Richardson. I'm known as your psychic girlfriend, and what I do is look at situations like this not just from a factual standpoint, but from an energetic, intuitive, and psychological lens. And sometimes you can listen to a story and think, how did someone stay in that? But when you look at the energy behind it, you start to understand how it happens, why it happens, and more importantly, how never to get pulled into something like this yourself. And that's why I wanted to cover this episode in this way, because this isn't just about one woman or one man. This is about emotional entrapment, manipulation disguised as vulnerability, and the patterns that keep people stuck longer than they should be. And while I was listening to this episode, there were a few themes that kept coming up over and over again. Crisis after crisis, emotional escalation when distance was created, and a family dynamic that honestly made me pause. And instead of just breaking this down logically, I pulled cards because I really wanted to understand this. What is really driving this behavior? So I put all my cards back in the deck, and I'm so sorry. So I'm going to, if you've been with me watching my episodes, you might be more familiar now with the cards, but I will walk you through them, so don't worry. Okay. So what I wanted to do is I asked some questions. Like while I'm listening, I just pulled some questions about like how I would do some self-inquiry. So I'm doing it this way, right? All right. I asked the question, is this about love, control, identity, or something else entirely? And the cards I pulled were Path, Whip, Coffin, and Tower. And immediately what I got from this isn't love. We'd see the heart or something like that, right? This is a pattern that repeats until something breaks. Because when you look at Mike's experience, and we're talking about Mike Maroncini, he's the third man, every time he tried to pull away, every time he created distance or space, something happened. A pregnancy, a complication, a medical emergency, a crisis with her father. And what the podcast shows clearly is this wasn't random. This is a pattern behavior. And energetically, it feels like control through repetition, identity through crisis, and ultimately emotional isolation. Because the Tower card That's not connection, that's containment. And while I'm thinking about this with her family, what we know about, well, what we think we know about her family is, I think this is how the family operates, right? Maybe this is how her mother operates, right? This is what she's learned behavior, okay? This isn't something I think that she was born with. I think this is something that she's learned. Okay, so now we talk about, like, we'll shift right into this family dynamic, and this is where things get even more interesting, because this episode just doesn't follow her behavior, it shows us this family dynamic. So the question I asked is, the family consciously enabling this or unconsciously participating? And I got mountain, clouds, heart, that's a heart, and coffin, which tells me this is love mixed with denial. And what we see directly in the episode is there's a moment where the father literally acknowledges that she exaggerates or makes things up, but then still says, promise her anything she wants to keep her alive. It's sort of like he's bypassing his own responsibility, right? That's not accountability. That's emotional override. And when then you have the mother present during the supposed cancer recovery moment, validating something that by all physical evidence didn't make sense. So what you're looking at here is not just one person. You're looking at a system that sustains the behavior. Mind-blowing, right? Mind-blowing. And while rational people would say, that's not love, they needed to get this chick help, right? But if you're in a family dynamic that doesn't know how to do that or is unwilling to do that, we get this, right? All right, so this is where people get confused, because they think, well, I would never have fallen for that. Like, what was Mike thinking? But when you're inside it, it doesn't look like manipulation. It looks like responsibility, compassion, and someone who needs you, which makes sense to us, right? You know, if you're someone who feels responsibility, or you're a compassionate person, you feel like, okay, this person needs me, so I'm gonna help them out. Am I the a-hole that would walk away from this situation? And we can see how Mike is, you know, just kind and compassionate. So I wanted to ask the question, like, why these men? Like, why Clayton? Why Greg? Why Mike? Why are they chosen, right? And so I got anchor, scythe, anchor, grounded, right? Scythe, birds, and sun. These are not random men. They are stable, grounded, empathic, or empathetic, non-confrontational. None of these men were, other than maybe Greg, were, able to, do confrontation well. And Mike even says himself, he avoids conflict and tries to leave relationships on good terms. Have we been there before? I know I have. But that's the anchor energy. And then the scythe comes in. Sudden chaos, birds, constant communication, anxiety, urgency. Laura's a master at this. And the sun? Well, these are men who have something to lose. They have reputation, stability, or their identity. So here's the translation. She's choosing men who will stay longer than they should and try to fix what's happening. I know I've been there. Have you? So then I asked, what's the core fear? What is she afraid would happen if she didn't create these situations? And remember, she's in this family dynamic that's probably doing the same thing, right? I pulled mice, birds, key, and house. And this one really hit, because this says without chaos, there's anxiety. And without the crisis, there's emptiness. And what she's actually afraid of is being alone with herself. So what happens? Crisis becomes connection. Chaos becomes closeness. And we see this over and over. So when he pulls away, she will escalate. This push-pull, right? So if you have any knowledge about attachment theory, this is someone who is very anxiously attached, right? Okay, so in my opinion, they're all my opinions, by the way. Okay, so I wanted to ask, where is the line between truth and fabrication? And the cards I pulled were tree, mountain, lily, and woman. And this is the part I think people really need to hear, because there's no clear line. Because this is integrated behavior. And Mike even says he believed her, especially about the cancer. Like, why would anybody who's rational, why would anybody think that they would think that? And yet, there were contradictions everywhere, red flags all over. But they were delivered in a way that felt calm, structured, and believable. And that's lily energy. This isn't sloppy lying. This is convincing storytelling that becomes identity. All right, so now I wanted to talk about something. The Napkin Lady. Because this is not just a woman on an airplane. This is archetype energy, right? So this is tree, letter, coffin, and child. This is deep emotional wounding. So if Laura fabricated this Napkin Lady, or there was some version of this, there's this expressing through constant communication. Think about the napkin as a form of communication. Wrapped in vulnerability. This is a woman who says, I need you, I'm hurting, something is wrong. And what happens is you lean in, right? You lean in, you care, you stay. So Mike did all that. Every turn, he was convinced he either convinced himself or somebody outside of him convinced himself to continue to stay. But underneath that, there's control, there's escalation, and there's a pattern that keeps repeating. It's just really interesting that we would call this woman the Napkin Lady, when it really kind of applies to Laura. All right, so there's something I want to bring back to you, because this is where I asked, what are the early warning signs people should not ignore? And I pulled the mountain, scythe, anchor, and hearts. And this is so clear for people like us, the empaths that get into relationships like this. We have to pay attention to when things don't add up. And that's the mountain. When emotional swings happen quickly, that's the scythe. And when you feel stuck, that could be the anchor. That's the negative part of the anchor. But when you care, and that's the heart, and that's the combination. That's what keeps people in situations longer than they should be. So this isn't just a story about one woman, Laura Owens. This is about how easily it is to get pulled into someone else's reality when your heart is open and your boundaries are still forming. And the real question I want to leave you with is this. At what point do you stop explaining someone and start protecting yourself? Okay? At what point do you stop explaining to someone and start protecting yourself? And if this resonated with you, let me know in the comments. And if you want me to continue to break down this case, let me know that too, because we're just getting started. And we got more Laura Owens coming up. And find me on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook, if you do Facebook, and Blue Sky. And follow along on my daily card pulls to help you anyway. As always, thank you for being here, liking and subscribing and commenting. Keep it kind. And this I learned from another YouTuber. Do something today that makes someone else feel good. Go out, buy someone a cup of coffee, or give them a genuine compliment, because we got to spread the love, right? But don't get stuck in someone else's reality. And I'll see you in the next one.